The Shirt of the Dead, a true horror story from Egypt. Cairo, 1954, in the 1950s. It was raining heavily that day, with thunder and lightning. And late at night, a man was walking alone, feeling scared and extremely cold, wanting warmth and food. After a long walk, he found a huge house. He rang the bell until a man appeared from a window and said, "Hello? What do you want, stranger?" He replied, "Please, I'm starving and the cold is killing me." The man said, "Please come in." Entering the house, the visitor felt warmth, safety, and comfort, and sat in front of the fireplace to warm up alongside the homeowner. After warming up, the homeowner brought him food and tea. They sat alone, with no servants, wife, or anyone else but his dog. The homeowner said, "Take this shirt. It will protect you from the harsh cold if you leave tomorrow. But for tonight, you can stay here." The visitor was delighted and thanked him. The next day, the homeowner woke up and started preparing breakfast in honor of his strange guest. When he entered the room where the guest had slept, he found it empty. He searched but could not find him. He thought he must have felt embarrassed and left early. Importantly, the homeowner was a wealthy man, and all his friends were well-known merchants and businessmen. He was invited to a museum for ancient tablets. He was happy to attend the museum, and while touring it with his colleagues, he was shocked by an unbelievable sight. He encountered a painting of the man who stayed at his house the night before. He told his colleagues, "This man in the painting stayed at my house last night." One colleague, astonished, said, "That man has been dead for over 50 years. Surely, someone must resemble him." The homeowner insisted, "I swear, it's the same mark on his face and his features are identical." His friend replied, "This person has been dead for 50 years, and I know his grave. If you don't believe me, ask others." So they all went to the cemetery, and upon reaching his grave, they found a surprising sight no one would have expected. They found the shirt the homeowner had given to the man the previous night, lying on his grave. In the year of 1813, my life took a turn that I could never have anticipated. My name is Maggie, a 17-year-old girl at the time, the sole child of a nobleman. I lived with my parents in a sprawling mansion located in a remote area, with a vast forest stretching out behind our home. Given the isolation of our mansion from the rest of the town, I found solace and adventure in exploring the outdoors. Every day, like clockwork, I would venture out around noon, only to return by lunchtime, often with a collection of flowers and fruits in hand. However, one fateful day, my routine was unexpectedly broken. I ventured out as usual but did not return at my customary time, causing worry to ripple through my family. As dusk turned to night, their concern deepened, and they set out in search of me, armed with torches and lanterns. Their search continued under the cloak of night until they ventured into the forest and reached the large swamp within. There, on the edge of the swamp, they found me, Maggie, lying motionless, my body rigid, eyes wide open in shock. Yet I was unable to move or speak. Still, I was alive. They quickly carried me back to the mansion and placed me in my bed. My family and relatives gathered around, desperate for any sign of what had befallen me. They bombarded me with questions. "Maggie, what happened to you? Who did this to you? And what led you into the forest?" But I remained immobile and silent, the shock rendering me unable to respond. The following morning brought a new kind of terror. I awoke screaming in absolute horror, in a way that could only be described as hysterical. My family rushed to my side, attempting to soothe me. Yet I could only scream about having seen something horrendous in the forest. I saw something horrendous in the forest, I repeated over and over in a state of hysteria. Despite their attempts to calm me and inquire further, my answer remained unchanged, oscillating between frantic screams and brief moments of silence before the cycle of terror began anew. This pattern persisted for days, with me waking to scream about the horrifying sight in the forest, then falling into a restless silence. After 3 weeks, my condition took a turn. For 3 consecutive days, I neither woke nor screamed nor uttered a single word. My family's worry and confusion deepened with each passing day. Life throws us some tough situations, and we often wonder what the lesson is. Here I am, mad, counting my story while tears of sorrow stream down my face for my wife. I married the girl next door in our village, an incredibly beautiful and virtuous woman, and we were blessed with our only child, Amjad, who bears a striking resemblance to his mother. In our 10 years of marriage, I don't recall us ever fighting. I never went to bed burdened with worries. But then, out of nowhere, this damn illness disrupted our peaceful lives. It spares no one, young or old, striking with fierce and ruthless force. And then, my wife passed away, leaving behind a husband and a child who could no longer taste the sweetness of life without her. Everyone felt sorry for me, plunged into severe bouts of crying, collapsing from the pain and agony of losing my wife. They had to pull me away from the graveyard several times. 2 weeks passed before I began to recover from what had happened. Then, I decided to visit the graveyard again, to comfort my wife's spirit. So, I drove there with my only son. And while I sat inside the cemetery, my boy stayed close to the wall, terrified. Suddenly, I felt a heavy presence and fear crept into me. I saw a shadow darting behind me. I turned around swiftly, standing up, but saw nothing. And Amjad was gone. Where did he go? I ran around, calling out my son's name at the top of my lungs, then broke down into hysterical crying, thinking I had lost him just like I had lost my wife, until I heard crying from a nearby grave, rushing towards the sound, thinking it was Amjad. I instead saw a child standing behind the graveyard gate, staring at me with oval eyes, black tears streaming down. My heart nearly stopped from fright. "Who are you?" I managed to ask. "Revenge," he answered, then disappeared. I turned around to find a child standing behind me. I gasped, thinking my heart would jump out. But it was Amjad. Grabbed him and hurried back to the car, driving home. As soon as we arrived, I looked at my son, a bit angry, asking why he left his spot. Trembling with fear, he said he hadn't moved. It was I who suddenly stood up, calling out to him while he kept telling me he was right there. But I didn't listen. He followed me until he found me sitting in the graveyard, shocked by his story. I asked if he had seen anyone. He denied seeing anybody, so I took him to his room. After making sure he was asleep, I went to rest. I woke up in the middle of the night, about to scream in fear when I saw my child standing firmly in the middle of the room. I turned on the light to find Amjad, half asleep, repeating like a robot, "Avenge Hazem!" Then he collapsed. After ensuring my son was okay, I decided to go back to the graveyard, hoping to uncover something. Indeed, the next day, I followed the shadow of a child running ahead of me to the graveyard, feeling the mystery lay there. Suddenly, the child appeared, his features disfigured, pointing to the ground. My hand trembled as I reached out, finding a necklace. When I looked up, the child was gone. I hurried out, sitting at a cafe to catch my breath and examine the necklace. There, a relative of my late wife approached and sat beside me. After a short conversation, he asked where I got the necklace, realizing he might know the child. I told him what happened. His eyes widened with horror, revealing the child's mother had been searching for him. And in that manner, he had been killed. I went with the man to meet the child's mother outside the village, as she had requested, to avoid her husband's wrath. He was a harsh man involved in dark arts. A month ago, he told her he had sent their child to relatives in the city. She never saw her son again, except in dreams where he cried for vengeance. We all thought of ways to deal with this harsh man. I had a good idea. We lured him to the graveyard, trapped him, and I locked him inside. His screams echoed as I drove away fast, only to see the child smiling at night. That night, I slept without fear for the first time.